There exists a profound deception woven into the fabric of human relationships, one so pervasive that it masquerades as love itself. We have been taught to mistake the trembling in our chest for passion, the sleepless nights for devotion, and the desperate clinging for affection. Yet what we call love is often nothing more than fear dressed in romantic clothing. Fear of abandonment, fear of inadequacy, fear of facing the vast emptiness within ourselves.
Used to call you every night at night. Now I'm drinking whiskey, doing fine. Your number's still there, but I ain't gonna call. Sometimes you gotta lose it all. I'm cutting loose, cutting free. You ain't got no hold on me. Walking away blues, that's what I got. Missing you a little, but hurting not. Saw your picture, put it in the drawer. Don't need that weight around here no more. These walking away blues got me feeling like I'm doing alright, I'm doing alright. I'm cutting loose, cutting free. You ain't got no hold on me. Walking away blues, that's what I got. Missing you a little, but hurting not.
The ancient Greek philosopher Plato spoke of love as a form of madness, a divine possession that strips us of reason. While his words carried poetic beauty, they also revealed a troubling truth. We have romanticized the very behaviors that indicate not love, but psychological dependency. The obsessive checking of phones, the anxiety when messages go unanswered, the way our entire emotional landscape shifts based on another's mood. These are not symptoms of deep affection, but warning signs of attachment disorder.
Cutting loose, cutting free. You ain't got no hold on me. Walking away blues, that's what I got. Missing you a little, but hurting not.
Carl Jung, the pioneering Swiss psychiatrist, understood this distinction with remarkable clarity. He observed that what most people call love is actually projection. We cast our own psychological needs, fears, and unconscious desires onto another person, and then mistake this projection for genuine connection. Jung wrote, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. This insight cuts to the heart of attachment. We are not truly seeing the other person at all, but rather using them as a mirror to reflect our own unresolved psychological material." The contemporary world has made this confusion worse by celebrating toxic behaviors as romantic ideals. We praise the lover who cannot function without their beloved, who sacrifices their identity for the relationship, who loves so intensely that it borders on obsession. Movies, songs, and literature feed us a steady diet of attachment disguised as romance, teaching us that suffering is the price of love, that jealousy proves devotion, that losing ourselves in another person demonstrates the depth of our feeling. This cultural conditioning runs so deep that most people have never experienced genuine love. They have known need, dependency, infatuation, and attachment, but they have never known the freedom that comes with loving someone without requiring them to fill an internal void. They have never experienced the peace of caring for someone while remaining complete within themselves. The joy of choosing to be with someone rather than needing to be with them. The philosopher Simone de Beauvoir understood this when she wrote about the difference between authentic love and what she called inauthentic love. Authentic love, in her view, enhances both individuals without diminishing either. It allows each person to flourish while creating something beautiful together. Inauthentic love, by contrast, requires one or both people to sacrifice their authenticity to maintain the relationship. The tragedy is that most people settle for inauthentic love because they fear the alternative is no love at all. They would rather have a relationship that slowly erodes their sense of self than face the possibility of being alone. They choose the familiar prison of attachment over the uncertain freedom of authentic love, because at least in prison they know where the walls are. The anatomy of attachment. To understand the difference between love and attachment, we must first dissect what attachment truly means. Attachment is not merely fondness or affection. It is a desperate clinging born from the unconscious belief that we cannot survive without another person. It is a terrifying whisper that says, "Without them, I am nothing." This belief creates a prison of dependency where our sense of self becomes hostage to another's presence. The Buddhist teacher Thich Nhat Hanh offers profound insight into this phenomenon. He explains that attachment arises from the illusion of separateness, the false belief that we are incomplete beings who need something external to make us whole. This illusion drives us to grasp at relationships, experiences, and possessions, thinking they will fill the void within us. Yet the more we grasp, the more we suffer because we are trying to solve an internal problem with external solutions. Attachment manifests in countless ways, each more subtle than the last. There is the partner who loses themselves in their relationship, abandoning friends, hobbies, and personal dreams to merge completely with their beloved. There is the lover who becomes a detective, analyzing every word, every gesture, every silence for signs of waning affection. There is the person who cannot bear to be alone, who jumps from relationship to relationship, never taking time to understand themselves. The German philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer described this pattern with his metaphor of the hedgehog's dilemma. Like hedgehogs seeking warmth in winter, humans draw close to one another but inevitably hurt each other with their spines. We desperately need connection, yet our neediness itself becomes the source of pain. Attachment is the spine that wounds. It is love contaminated by fear, desire polluted by desperation. Consider the person who constantly seeks reassurance from their partner, asking again and again if they are loved, if they are valued, if they will be abandoned. This behavior stems not from love, but from a deep wound within themselves, a wound that no amount of external validation can heal. The more they seek reassurance, the more burdensome they become to their partner, creating the very rejection they fear. Or think about the individual who becomes jealous at the mere mention of their partner's ex-lovers, who interrogates them about their past, who demands to know where they are at every moment. This is not protective love, but possessive attachment. It treats the beloved not as a free agent capable of choice, but as a possession that might be stolen. Attachment also manifests in the way we use relationships to avoid facing ourselves. We fill our lives with romantic drama, constant communication, and shared activities so that we never have to sit alone with our own thoughts and feelings. We use the other person as a drug to numb our existential anxiety, our fear of death, our sense of meaninglessness. The psychologist Erich Fromm distinguished between mature love and immature love in his seminal work, The Art of Loving. Immature love, he argued, says, "I love you because I need you," while mature love says, "I need you because I love you." This distinction captures the essence of attachment versus love. Attachment loves because it needs, while love needs because it loves. The physiological responses to attachment also reveal its true nature. When we are attached to someone, our nervous system becomes dysregulated in their absence. We experience genuine withdrawal symptoms, anxiety, depression, obsessive thoughts, physical pain. Our body goes into a state of alarm, as if we were facing a genuine threat to our survival. This is not the response of love, but of addiction. True love, by contrast, brings a sense of peace and expansion even in separation. There may be sadness at parting, certainly, but not the desperate panic of withdrawal. There is trust in the connection that transcends physical presence, faith in the beloved's autonomy, and joy in their independent existence. The wound beneath the want. Every attachment has its roots in an original wound, usually formed in childhood, when our developing psyche first learned that love came with conditions. Perhaps we learned that affection was earned through performance. That attention was given only when we were quiet, compliant, or exceptional. Maybe we discovered that love could disappear without warning, leaving us with an underlying terror of abandonment that would echo through every relationship thereafter. The psychologist John Bowlby, who developed attachment theory, showed us that our earliest relationships create internal working models that shape how we approach intimacy throughout our lives. If we experienced inconsistent caregiving, we might develop an anxious attachment style, constantly seeking reassurance and fearing abandonment. If we were neglected or rejected, we might develop avoidant patterns, protecting ourselves by keeping others at arm's length. These early experiences create what Jung called complexes, autonomous psychological structures that operate outside our conscious awareness. The abandoned child within us continues to seek the love it never received, driving us to replay familiar patterns even when they cause suffering. We may find ourselves attracted to emotionally unavailable partners, not because we enjoy pain, but because our unconscious mind recognizes the familiar dynamic and believes it can finally heal the original wound. The spiritual teacher Eckhart Tolle speaks of the pain body, the accumulated emotional pain that lives within us and feeds on drama and suffering. This pain body becomes addicted to the very experiences that hurt us, creating a cycle where we unconsciously seek out relationships that confirm our deepest fears about ourselves. We become attached not just to people, but to the familiar patterns of pain they represent. Consider the child who learned that love was conditional on being perfect. As an adult, this person might become attached to partners who are critical and demanding, unconsciously seeking to finally earn the unconditional love they never received. They will sacrifice their authentic self to meet impossible standards, all while telling themselves this is what love requires. Or think about the child who experienced abandonment early in life. They might become attached to partners who are unreliable or unavailable, constantly trying to prove they are worthy of staying. They will tolerate behaviors they know are harmful because their unconscious mind believes that if they can just love this person enough, they can heal the original wound of abandonment. The French psychoanalyst Jacques Lacan wrote extensively about the lack that drives human desire. In his understanding, we are all born with a fundamental sense of incompleteness that drives us to seek wholeness through others. This lack is not a problem to be solved, but a condition of human existence. The trouble comes when we try to fill this existential lack with another person, creating attachment rather than accepting the lack as part of what makes us human. The process of healing these original wounds requires what Alice Miller, the Swiss psychologist, called conscious suffering. We must feel the original pain fully, without trying to escape it through attachment to others. We must grieve the love we never received, the safety we never had, the validation we were denied. Only by feeling these wounds completely can we stop trying to heal them through our relationships. This healing work is often triggered by the very relationships that wound us. When someone we are attached to leaves us, we are forced to face the original abandonment. When someone rejects us, we must confront the original rejection. When someone fails to see us, we encounter the original invisibility. These experiences are opportunities for healing if we can resist the urge to immediately seek another attachment to numb the pain. The mystic Rumi understood this when he wrote, "The wound is the place where the light enters you." Our deepest wounds, when faced with courage and consciousness, become gateways to healing and wholeness. But this requires us to stop using relationships as bandages and start using them as mirrors that reflect our own psychological material back to us. The theatre of false love. When we operate from attachment rather than love, we enter into a kind of theatre where both parties play roles designed to maintain the illusion of connection. We become actors in a drama we did not consciously choose, speaking lines written by our unconscious fears and unhealed wounds. The French philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre wrote extensively about bad faith, the ways we deceive ourselves to avoid confronting difficult truths. In attachment-based relationships, we engage in elaborate forms of bad faith, pretending that our desperate need is actually devotion, that our jealousy is evidence of caring, that our inability to function without the other demonstrates the depth of our love. This theatre has many acts. There is the act of idealization, where we place our partner on a pedestal so high that they cease to be human and become instead a projection of our own need for perfection. There is the act of codependency, where we become so enmeshed that we lose track of where we end and they begin. There is the act of emotional manipulation, where we use guilt, anger, or withdrawal to control the other's behavior. The Russian novelist Leo Tolstoy understood this dynamic profoundly. In Anna Karenina, he wrote, "I think, if it is true that there are as many minds as there are heads, then there are as many kinds of love as there are hearts." Yet Tolstoy also showed us that not all forms of love are equal. Some liberate while others imprison. Some nurture growth while others stunt it. In the theatre of false love, we often play roles that are completely contrary to our authentic nature. The naturally independent person becomes clingy and needy. The generous person becomes withholding and manipulative. The confident person becomes insecure and jealous. We shapeshift to maintain the attachment, losing ourselves in the process. This shapeshifting is particularly insidious because it often works in the short term. By becoming what we think the other person wants, we may indeed secure their attention and affection. But this victory is hollow because the love we receive is not really for us, it is for the character we are playing. Deep down, we know that if they saw our true self, they might leave, so we live in constant fear of being discovered. The playwright Tennessee Williams captured this perfectly in A Streetcar Named Desire, when Blanche Dubois says, "I have always depended on the kindness of strangers." Blanche lives in a fantasy world, creating elaborate fictions to avoid facing painful realities. In attachment-based relationships, we all become versions of Blanche, creating fantasies about ourselves and our partners to avoid the difficult work of genuine intimacy. The masks we wear in these theatrical relationships are numerous and varied. There is the mask of the perfect partner who never disagrees, never has needs, never shows negative emotions. There is the mask of the rescuer who believes they can heal their partner's wounds through love alone. There is the mask of the victim who uses their pain to manipulate others into staying. These masks are exhausting to maintain, and eventually they begin to crack. The perfect partner has a breakdown, the rescuer becomes resentful, the victim becomes angry. When the masks fall away, both people are shocked to discover they have been in a relationship with strangers, and that they themselves have become strangers to themselves. The Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard wrote about the aesthetic mode of existence, where people live on the surface of life, avoiding depth and authenticity in favor of immediate pleasure and stimulation. Attachment-based relationships often operate in this aesthetic mode, focused on the drama and intensity of emotion rather than the depth and authenticity of connection. Breaking free from this theatre requires what Kierkegaard called the leap into authentic existence. We must risk losing the relationship to gain our authentic selves. We must stop performing and start being, stop manipulating and start communicating, stop hiding and start revealing. This is terrifying because it means we might discover that what we thought was love was actually just two people using each other to avoid facing themselves. The addiction of attachment. Perhaps the most disturbing aspect of attachment is its addictive quality. Like any addiction, it follows a predictable pattern. Initial euphoria, increasing tolerance, withdrawal symptoms, and compulsive seeking behavior. The high of early romance with its flooding of dopamine and oxytocin can create a biochemical dependency that has little to do with genuine compatibility or love. Dr. Helen Fisher, an anthropologist who studies the brain chemistry of love, has shown that romantic attachment activates the same reward pathways as cocaine. The euphoria of reciprocated attraction, the agony of separation, the compulsive thoughts about the beloved, all of these mirror the patterns of substance addiction. This helps explain why people stay in obviously destructive relationships, why they return to partners who hurt them, why they feel they cannot survive without someone who brings them pain. The addiction metaphor is not merely poetic, it is neurologically accurate. When we are attached to someone, our brain becomes dependent on the chemical rewards of their presence. Their approval triggers dopamine release, their disapproval causes genuine withdrawal symptoms. We become like addicts, organizing our entire lives around our next fix of validation, attention, or affection. This addiction is particularly insidious because it masquerades as virtue. Society celebrates the lover who cannot live without their beloved, the partner who sacrifices everything for their relationship, the person who loves too much. We have created a culture that romanticizes what are essentially symptoms of psychological dysfunction. The phases of attachment addiction mirror those of substance addiction with remarkable precision. In the initial phase, there is the euphoric rush of new love, the feeling that we have finally found our missing piece, the intoxicating sense that all our problems are solved. We cannot imagine ever feeling this good about anyone else. We believe we have found our soulmate, our destiny, our salvation. As the addiction progresses, we begin to need more of the drug, more attention, more reassurance, more proof of love. The natural fluctuations of human emotion and attention become sources of anxiety. When our partner is busy, tired, or simply in a different mood, we interpret it as a sign that their love is waning. We begin to demand more time, more communication, more demonstrations of affection. The tolerance phase follows, where the same behaviors that once satisfied us no longer provide the chemical high we crave. We need bigger gestures, more dramatic declarations, more intense experiences to feel loved. The relationship becomes increasingly volatile as both people struggle to maintain the artificial high that characterized the early stages. Withdrawal symptoms appear whenever our source of supply is threatened. If our partner needs space, we experience panic. If they spend time with others, we feel abandoned. If they disagree with us, we feel unloved. Our nervous system goes into crisis mode, flooding us with stress hormones and emergency responses designed to reunite us with our drug of choice. The psychologist Stanton Peele was one of the first to recognize love addiction as a genuine addiction. He observed that people could become as dependent on relationships as others become dependent on alcohol or drugs. The symptoms are the same: compulsive behavior, loss of control, continued engagement despite negative consequences, and inability to stop despite repeated attempts. Like other addictions, attachment addiction often involves denial. We tell ourselves that our jealousy proves how much we care, that our need for constant contact shows our devotion, that our inability to function without our partner demonstrates true love. We rationalize behaviors that we would clearly see as unhealthy in others. The recovery process from attachment addiction follows similar principles to recovery from substance addiction. It requires admitting powerlessness over the other person, accepting that the relationship as it exists is unmanageable, and turning to a higher power, whether that is God, the universe, or simply the wisdom of our higher self. Recovery also requires what the 12-step programs call fearless moral inventory, an honest examination of our own behavior and motivations. We must acknowledge the ways we have used others to avoid facing ourselves, the ways we have manipulated to get our needs met, the ways we have sacrificed our integrity to maintain our supply of love. The process is difficult because it requires us to face the very feelings we have been using the relationship to avoid: loneliness, inadequacy, fear, sadness, anger. We must learn to tolerate these feelings without immediately seeking someone to take them away. We must develop what psychologists call distress tolerance, the ability to experience difficult emotions without immediately acting to escape them. The wisdom of detachment. To understand what lies beyond attachment, we must turn to the wisdom traditions that have grappled with these questions for millennia. The Buddhist concept of non-attachment offers a radical alternative to our usual understanding of love. Non-attachment does not mean indifference or emotional numbness. It means loving without clinging, caring without possessing, connecting without losing oneself. The Buddha taught that attachment is the root of suffering. He saw that our desperate clinging to people, experiences, and outcomes creates a prison of our own making. When we attach to something, we live in constant fear of losing it. This fear poisons the very thing we are trying to protect, turning love into anxiety, joy into worry, connection into control. The Hindu tradition speaks of different types of love, distinguishing between kama, physical attraction, prema, emotional attachment, and bhakti, selfless devotion. Bhakti represents the highest form of love, one that seeks the beloved's highest good, even at the cost of personal desire. This is love without conditions, love that does not seek to possess or control, but simply to serve the other's authentic flourishing. The Sufi poet Rumi wrote extensively about the difference between attachment and true love. In his understanding, attachment is like a prison cell that we mistake for a palace. We become so comfortable with our chains that we fear freedom. True love, by contrast, is like the wind, free, powerful, and impossible to contain. It does not diminish when shared, it multiplies. The Taoist tradition offers the concept of wu wei, effortless action that flows with the natural order rather than fighting against it. In relationships, this means loving without forcing, connecting without grasping, being together without losing ourselves. Wu Wei teaches us to trust the natural flow of love rather than trying to control its expression. The Christian mystic tradition speaks of agape, unconditional love that seeks nothing in return. This is perhaps the purest form of love, one that loves for the sake of loving rather than for what it can receive. Agape does not depend on the beloved's behavior, worthiness, or reciprocation. It simply is, like the sun that shines on both the just and the unjust. The Jewish tradition offers the concept of hesed, loving kindness, that is both a feeling and an action. Hesed recognizes that true love must be expressed through behavior, but behavior that serves the beloved's authentic well-being rather than our own psychological needs. It is love in action, but action guided by wisdom rather than attachment. These wisdom traditions all point to the same fundamental truth. Genuine love liberates while attachment imprisons. Love seeks the beloved's freedom while attachment seeks to possess them. Love trusts while attachment controls. Love accepts while attachment demands change. The practice of detachment does not mean becoming cold or indifferent. On the contrary, it often allows us to love more deeply because we are not contaminating our love with our own psychological needs. When we love without attachment, we can see the other person more clearly, appreciate them more fully, and serve their authentic well-being more effectively. Detachment also means accepting the impermanent nature of all relationships. Everything that comes together must eventually come apart. Everyone who enters our life will eventually leave, if not before, then certainly through death. This is not a tragic truth, but simply the nature of existence. When we accept impermanence, we can love more fully in the present moment, rather than spending our energy trying to guarantee the future. The practice of loving-kindness meditation, common in Buddhist traditions, offers a practical way to cultivate non-attached love. We begin by sending loving wishes to ourselves, then extend them to loved ones, neutral people, difficult people, and finally all beings everywhere. This practice teaches us that love is not a scarce resource that must be hoarded, but an infinite capacity that grows stronger with use. The path of individuation. Jung's concept of individuation offers a psychological framework for understanding the journey from attachment to authentic love. Individuation is the process by which we become who we truly are, integrating all aspects of our personality, both light and shadow, into a coherent whole. This process requires us to withdraw our projections from others and take responsibility for our own psychological material. The path of individuation is necessarily solitary. We cannot become whole by merging with another person. We can only become whole by facing ourselves with complete honesty. This requires confronting our shadow, the parts of ourselves we have rejected, denied, or hidden. It means acknowledging our neediness, our fears, our capacity for manipulation and control. This confrontation is terrifying because it forces us to give up the illusion that someone else can save us. We must face the existential reality that we are alone in our own consciousness, that no one else can fill the void within us, that our sense of completeness must come from within or not at all. Yet this confrontation is also liberating. When we stop expecting others to complete us, we free them to be themselves. When we stop trying to merge with our beloved, we create space for genuine intimacy. When we withdraw our projections, we can finally see the other person as they truly are, not as we need them to be. The process of individuation involves what Jung called holding the tension of opposites. We must learn to contain contradictory feelings and impulses without immediately acting to resolve the tension. We might love someone while also being angry with them. We might feel both connected and separate, both fulfilled and longing, both secure and uncertain. Learning to hold these paradoxes without collapsing into simplistic either-or thinking is essential for psychological maturity. Individuation also requires what Jung called the transcendent function, the ability to find a third way that honors both sides of a conflict. In relationships, this might mean finding ways to be both intimate and independent, both committed and free, both vulnerable and strong. This is not about compromise, but about transcending the apparent contradictions to find a higher synthesis. The archetypal patterns that Jung identified in the human psyche play important roles in our relationships. The anima, the feminine aspect in men, and animus, the masculine aspect in women, are often projected onto romantic partners, creating intense attractions that are really about our own psychological wholeness. When we integrate these internal opposites, we become less dependent on external relationships to feel complete. The mother and father archetypes also influence our relationships in profound ways. We might seek partners who embody the nurturing mother or the protective father, trying to get from them what we never received from our actual parents. Or we might rebel against these archetypes, choosing partners who are nothing like our parents but who trigger the same unresolved psychological material. The process of individuation requires us to reclaim these projections and take responsibility for our own psychological wholeness. Instead of seeking the perfect mother or father in our partner, we must develop our own capacity for self-nurturing and self-protection. Instead of looking for our anima or animus in another person, we must cultivate the contrasexual aspects within ourselves. This does not mean we no longer need relationships. On the contrary, when we are individuated, we can relate to others from a place of wholeness rather than neediness. We can appreciate their unique qualities without requiring them to complete us. We can love them for who they are, rather than what they represent psychologically. The individuated person is what Jung called a conscious individual, someone who takes responsibility for their own psychological state and does not make others responsible for their happiness or fulfillment. They have what the psychologist David Riccio calls emotional self-sufficiency, the ability to meet their own emotional needs while remaining open to connection with others. The alchemy of solitude. The journey from attachment to love necessarily passes through the valley of solitude. This is perhaps the most frightening aspect of the path, because we have been conditioned to fear being alone. We equate solitude with loneliness, silence with emptiness, independence with isolation. Yet solitude is not the absence of love, it is the foundation upon which genuine love can be built. The German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche understood this profoundly. He wrote, "All truly great thoughts are conceived while walking." This was not merely about physical movement, but about the inner journey that requires us to walk alone with our thoughts, to confront ourselves without the distraction of others, to find our own way rather than following the well-worn paths of dependency. Solitude teaches us to distinguish between loneliness and aloneness. Loneliness is the pain of feeling disconnected from others. Aloneness is the peace of being connected to ourselves. In solitude, we learn to become our own companion, to find interest in our own thoughts, to derive satisfaction from our own company. This is not narcissism, it is the basic self-respect that makes genuine love possible. The spiritual teacher Krishnamurti emphasized that relationship is a mirror in which we see ourselves. But to see clearly, we must first know what we are looking at. Solitude provides this self-knowledge. It strips away the roles we play for others, the masks we wear to gain approval, the false selves we construct to avoid rejection. In solitude, we meet ourselves as we truly are. The fear of solitude runs deeper than most people realize. It is connected to our deepest existential anxieties, the fear of death, the fear of meaninglessness, the fear of our own psychological depths. When we are alone, we cannot distract ourselves from these fundamental questions. Who am I? Why am I here? What is the meaning of my existence? These questions are uncomfortable because they have no easy answers. We prefer to lose ourselves in relationships, work, entertainment, or other distractions rather than sitting with the mystery of our own existence. But solitude forces us to confront these questions, and in doing so, it offers the possibility of finding our own answers rather than accepting the answers others have given us. The practice of solitude is not about becoming a hermit or avoiding human connection. It is about developing the capacity to be alone without being lonely, to find contentment in our own company, to draw strength from our inner resources. This capacity is essential for healthy relationships because it means we come to others from choice rather than desperation. Many spiritual traditions have recognized the importance of solitude for psychological and spiritual development. The Christian mystics spoke of the desert experience, a time of spiritual dryness and isolation that was necessary for genuine growth. The Buddhist tradition includes periods of retreat where practitioners spend extended time alone with their own mind. The Hindu tradition speaks of the hermit stage of life, when one withdraws from worldly concerns to focus on inner development. In our hyperconnected modern world, true solitude has become increasingly rare. We are constantly bombarded with stimulation, emails, texts, social media, entertainment. Even when we are physically alone, we often fill the silence with noise, activity, or distraction. Learning to be truly alone in silence with nothing but our own thoughts and feelings has become a lost art. Yet this art is essential for anyone who wants to move from attachment to love. In solitude, we learn to self-soothe, to find our own center, to draw strength from within rather than depending on others for our emotional stability. We discover that we are more resilient than we thought, more interesting than we believed, more complete than we imagined. The journey through solitude is not always pleasant. We may encounter difficult emotions that we have been avoiding. Grief, anger, fear, sadness. We may face aspects of ourselves that we do not like, our selfishness, our pettiness, our capacity for cruelty. We may confront the reality that we have been living a false life, playing roles that are not authentic to our true nature. But this confrontation, however painful, is also liberating. When we stop running from ourselves, we can finally begin the work of integration and healing. When we accept our shadow as well as our light, we become whole human beings capable of authentic love. When we embrace our solitude, we discover that we are never truly alone. We carry within us a vast inner world that is endlessly fascinating and ultimately sufficient. The paradox of letting go. The path from attachment to love involves a fundamental paradox. We must let go of what we want most in order to have it. This paradox confounds the ego, which believes that holding tighter will prevent loss, that controlling more will ensure security, that needing less will result in having less. The Taoist sage Lao Tzu understood this paradox intimately. He wrote, "If you want to shrink something, you must first allow it to expand. If you want to weaken something, you must first allow it to become strong." Applied to relationships, this means that to keep someone close, we must be willing to let them go. To love deeply, we must love without attachment. This letting go is not passive resignation, but active choice. It requires tremendous courage to love someone while simultaneously releasing any claim to their presence in our life. It means saying, "I love you enough to want your happiness, even if that happiness does not include me." This is perhaps the most mature form of love, one that prioritizes the beloved's authentic well-being over our own psychological comfort. The process of letting go reveals the difference between love and attachment with startling clarity. When we try to let go of someone we are attached to, we feel like we are dying. Every cell in our body rebels against the separation. We experience genuine withdrawal symptoms, anxiety, depression, obsessive thoughts, physical pain. This is not love, it is addiction. When we let go in love, the experience is entirely different. There is sadness, yes, but also a sense of rightness, of honor, of respect for the other's autonomy. There is grief for what will not be, but also gratitude for what was. There is loss, but also liberation, the freedom that comes from loving without conditions, without expectations, without the need to possess or control. The paradox of letting go extends beyond romantic relationships to all areas of life. When we grasp tightly to our children, trying to control their choices and protect them from all harm, we often push them away. When we let go, trusting in their ability to make their own decisions and learn from their own mistakes, we often find that they come to us more freely. In careers, those who cling desperately to security often find themselves stuck in unfulfilling positions. Those who are willing to take risks, to let go of what is familiar and safe, often find greater success and satisfaction. The universe seems to reward those who trust enough to let go and punish those who try to control outcomes through force. This paradox operates because attachment is based on fear, while letting go is based on trust. When we operate from fear, we create the very outcomes we are trying to avoid. Our desperate clinging pushes others away. Our attempts to control situations often make them spiral out of control. Our refusal to accept loss often guarantees it. When we operate from trust, we create space for genuine connection and authentic outcomes. People feel free to choose us rather than feeling trapped by our neediness. Situations can unfold naturally rather than being forced into artificial configurations. Loss becomes transformation rather than ending. The mystic tradition speaks of this as surrender, not giving up but giving over, not resignation but alignment with a wisdom greater than our own limited perspective. In surrender, we acknowledge that we cannot control outcomes, only our own responses. We cannot make others love us, only make ourselves worthy of love. We cannot prevent loss, only choose how we relate to it. This surrender is particularly challenging in a culture that worships control and celebrates those who make things happen through force of will. We are taught that love can be earned through sufficient effort, that relationships can be maintained through proper strategy, that loss can be prevented through careful planning. But the deepest wisdom traditions teach the opposite. Love cannot be earned. It can only be received as a gift. Relationships cannot be maintained through strategy. They can only flourish in an atmosphere of freedom. Loss cannot be prevented, it can only be accepted as part of the natural flow of existence. Learning to let go requires developing what the Buddhists call beginner's mind, approaching each moment without preconceptions, without demands, without the need to have things be different than they are. It means loving what is, rather than clinging to what was, or demanding what might be. The tyranny of expectation. One of the most insidious aspects of attachment is the web of expectations we weave around our relationships. We expect our partner to make us happy, to fulfill our needs, to validate our worth, to be our everything. These expectations are like invisible chains that bind both parties to a predetermined script. The Indian spiritual teacher Jiddu Krishnamurti spoke extensively about the destructive nature of psychological expectations. He saw that expectations are projections of our own psychological needs onto others, demands that they fulfill roles we have assigned without their consent. When we expect someone to love us in a particular way, we are not loving them, we are using them. Expectations create a transaction-based relationship where love becomes conditional. We keep score. I did this for you, so you should do that for me. We withdraw affection when our expectations are not met, creating a climate of fear and manipulation. The other person learns to perform rather than simply be, to meet our needs rather than express their authentic self. The tyranny of expectations is particularly evident in the stories we tell ourselves about how relationships should work. We expect our partner to remember anniversaries, to know what we need without being told, to prioritize us above all others, to never find anyone else attractive, to grow and change in ways that complement our own development. These expectations are rarely voiced explicitly, yet they operate as invisible contracts that govern the relationship. When these unspoken expectations are inevitably violated, we feel betrayed, angry, or disappointed. We interpret the other person's failure to meet our expectations as evidence that they do not truly love us, care about us, or understand us. Yet we never examine whether our expectations were reasonable, communicated clearly, or even fair. The philosopher Alain de Bottas argues in Essays in Love that romantic relationships are particularly susceptible to unrealistic expectations because they begin in a state of idealization. During the honeymoon phase, both people are on their best behavior, creating an unrealistic baseline for what the relationship will be like over time. When normal human imperfections inevitably surface, they feel like betrayals of the original promise. True love has no expectations because it recognizes the other's complete autonomy. It does not demand reciprocity, consistency, or even presence. It simply appreciates what is offered without needing it to be different. This does not mean having no boundaries or standards. It means not making our love conditional on the other's behavior. The freedom from expectations is liberating for both parties. When we stop expecting our partner to make us happy, we free them from an impossible burden. When we stop expecting them to be perfect, we allow them to be human. When we stop expecting them to never change, we create space for growth and evolution. The Buddhist teacher Pema Chodron teaches about the practice of no expectations and no agenda. This means approaching each interaction with our beloved without needing it to go a certain way, without requiring them to respond in a particular manner, without demanding specific outcomes. This creates space for genuine spontaneity and authentic connection. Releasing expectations does not mean becoming passive or indifferent. We can still have preferences, desires, and hopes. The difference is that we hold these lightly, without attachment to outcomes. We can express what we would like while accepting what we receive. We can share our needs while taking responsibility for meeting them ourselves. The dance of intimacy. True intimacy cannot exist where there is attachment, because attachment creates a merger that obliterates the space between two people. Intimacy requires what the philosopher Martin Buber called an I-thou relationship, a meeting between two complete beings who maintain their separate identities while connecting deeply. Buber distinguished between I-it relationships, where we treat others as objects to be used, and I-thou relationships, where we encounter others as subjects worthy of respect. Attachment creates I-it relationships because we use the other person to meet our psychological needs. Love creates I-thou relationships because we meet the other as they truly are, not as we need them to be. The dance of intimacy requires what the poet Rainer Maria Rilke called solitudes protecting and bordering and greeting each other. Two people come together not to merge but to meet, maintaining their individual integrity while creating something new between them. This is far more challenging than attachment because it requires us to be vulnerable without being dependent, to be open without being needy. Intimacy also requires what the psychologist Carl Rogers called unconditional positive regard, the ability to accept another person completely without trying to change them. This is radically different from attachment, which always carries the hidden agenda of getting our needs met. Love says, "I accept you as you are." Attachment says, "I accept you as you are, but I secretly hope you will change." The capacity for true intimacy develops gradually as we learn to tolerate increasing levels of vulnerability and authenticity. In the early stages of a relationship, we share relatively safe information about ourselves, our preferences, our history, our opinions. As trust builds, we may share more sensitive material, our fears, our dreams, our wounds, but the deepest level of intimacy involves sharing our authentic self without any agenda, without trying to create a particular impression, without seeking a specific response. This is what the psychologist Arthur Aron calls self-expansion, the experience of discovering new aspects of ourselves through connection with another. True intimacy is not constant, but rhythmic. There are times of closeness and times of distance, times of sharing and times of solitude, times of harmony and times of conflict. This natural rhythm is healthy and necessary. Attachment seeks to maintain constant closeness, which actually prevents intimacy by not allowing space for each person to have their own experience. The practice of mindful communication is essential for creating genuine intimacy. This means speaking from our authentic experience rather than from our expectations or demands. It means listening to understand rather than to respond. It means being present with what is actually happening rather than what we wish were happening. Intimacy also requires the courage to be seen fully, including our less attractive qualities. In attachment-based relationships, we often hide our anger, our sadness, our fear, our selfishness, because we believe these emotions will drive the other person away. But true intimacy includes all of our human experience, not just the pleasant parts. The spiritual teacher Ram Dass spoke of relationships as fierce grace, experiences that force us to grow in ways we might not choose on our own. True intimacy provides this fierce grace by reflecting back to us aspects of ourselves we might prefer to ignore. Our beloved becomes a mirror that shows us our own psychological material, our own unhealed wounds, our own capacity for both love and fear. The shadow of relationship. Every relationship has a shadow, the parts of ourselves we refuse to acknowledge that get projected onto our partner. Jung understood that we are often most irritated by qualities in others that we possess but refuse to own. The partner who seems too needy may be reflecting our own unacknowledged neediness. The one who appears too independent may be mirroring our own fear of intimacy. The shadow in relationships is particularly dangerous because it operates unconsciously. We may believe we are loving someone while actually hating the parts of ourselves they represent. We may think we are helping them grow while actually trying to fix our own disowned qualities. This creates a distorted relationship where neither person is truly seen or accepted. Owning our shadow is essential for moving from attachment to love. We must acknowledge our own capacity for manipulation, control, neediness, and fear. We must recognize that the very qualities we criticize in our partner may be aspects of ourselves we have split off and rejected. This is humbling work, but it is also liberating because it allows us to take responsibility for our own psychological material rather than making our partner responsible for it. The integration of the shadow leads to what Jung called the transcendent function, the ability to hold opposites in creative tension. We can love someone while also recognizing their flaws. We can be committed while also maintaining our independence. We can be vulnerable while also being strong. This capacity for paradox is essential for mature love. The shadow also includes our positive qualities that we have disowned. We may be attracted to someone who embodies creativity, confidence, or joy because these are aspects of ourselves we have not yet claimed. The relationship becomes an opportunity to reclaim these lost parts of ourselves rather than simply admiring them in another. When we project our positive shadow onto our partner, we create unrealistic expectations and eventual disappointment. We put them on a pedestal, expecting them to be consistently creative, confident, or joyful. When they inevitably show their human imperfections, we feel betrayed. The solution is to recognize that we are attracted to these qualities because they live within us, waiting to be developed. The process of shadow work in relationships involves what the psychologist John Wellwood calls conscious relationship, using the relationship as a path of psychological and spiritual development. Every trigger, every conflict, every moment of irritation becomes an opportunity to explore our own unconscious material. This work requires tremendous honesty and courage. We must be willing to consider that our judgments of our partner may be projections of our own disowned qualities. We must explore our own motivations, examining whether our love is genuine or whether we are using the other person to avoid facing ourselves. The reward for this work is the possibility of truly seeing and loving another person rather than loving our projection onto them. When we withdraw our projections and own our shadow, we create space for authentic intimacy based on reality rather than fantasy. The myth of completion. One of the most damaging myths in our culture is the idea that another person can complete us. This myth suggests that we are born incomplete and must find our other half to become whole. It is the myth that drives countless people to search desperately for their soulmate, their twin flame, their perfect match. This myth is not only false but destructive. It creates the illusion that we are inadequate as we are, that our wholeness depends on finding the right person. It encourages us to give away our power, to make our happiness dependent on another's presence, to live in a state of chronic incompleteness until we find our supposed other half. The truth is that we are born complete. Our sense of incompleteness is a psychological wound, not an existential reality. We feel incomplete because we have been disconnected from parts of ourselves, our creativity, our strength, our wisdom, our capacity for joy. Finding another person will not restore these lost parts. Only inner work can do that. The myth of completion also creates impossible pressure on relationships. If we believe our partner is supposed to complete us, we demand that they fill every void, meet every need, satisfy every desire. This is not love, it is emotional vampirism. We drain the life from the relationship by expecting it to provide what can only come from within. True love recognizes that two complete people are choosing to share their completeness, not two incomplete people trying to become whole through each other. This creates a relationship based on abundance rather than scarcity, on giving rather than taking, on choice rather than need. The ancient Greek philosopher Aristotle distinguished between three types of love: eros, passionate love; philia, friendship; and agape, unconditional love. Eros, while intense and exciting, is often based on the illusion of completion, the feeling that this person will finally make us whole. Philia is based on mutual respect and shared values. Agape transcends all personal need and simply loves for the sake of loving. The healthiest relationships combine all three types of love, but they are grounded in agape, the recognition that love is not about getting something from another person, but about expressing our own capacity for love. When we love from agape, we do not need the other person to complete us because we are already whole. The journey from seeking completion in others to recognizing our own wholeness is one of the most important transitions we can make. It requires giving up the romantic fantasy that there is someone out there who will solve all our problems and make us happy. It means accepting responsibility for our own happiness, our own growth, our own sense of meaning and purpose. This transition can be particularly challenging because it requires us to face the existential reality that we are alone in our own consciousness. No one else can think our thoughts, feel our feelings, or make our choices. This aloneness is not a problem to be solved, but a condition of human existence to be accepted. When we accept our fundamental aloneness, paradoxically, we become more available for genuine connection. We no longer need others to complete us, so we can appreciate them for who they are, rather than what they can provide. We can love them without the desperate need to possess or control them. The myth of completion also perpetuates the idea that there is only one right person for each of us. This creates anxiety about finding the one and fear about whether our current partner is truly our soulmate. The reality is that there are many people with whom we could create loving, fulfilling relationships if we bring our whole self to the connection. The courage to be alone. The path from attachment to love requires the courage to be alone, not just physically, but emotionally and psychologically. This means developing the capacity to self-soothe, to find meaning and purpose independent of others, to face our fears and insecurities without using another person as a buffer. The existentialist philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre wrote, "Hell is other people." While this is often misunderstood, Sartre was pointing to the way we use others to avoid confronting ourselves. We surround ourselves with people, noise, and activity to avoid the silence where we might have to face our own thoughts and feelings. We use relationships as escape routes from the fundamental aloneness of human existence. But this aloneness is not a curse. It is a gift. In aloneness, we discover our own resources, our own strength, our own capacity for joy. We learn that we are not as fragile as we believed, that we can survive disappointment, rejection, and loss. We discover that our happiness is not dependent on another's presence, but on our own connection to life itself. The courage to be alone also means the courage to be authentic. When we are not dependent on others for our sense of self, we can afford to be genuine. We can express our true thoughts and feelings without fear of abandonment. We can pursue our own interests and dreams without needing permission or approval. We can love without the desperate need to be loved in return. Many people confuse being alone with being lonely, but these are entirely different experiences. Loneliness is the pain of feeling disconnected from others. Being alone is simply a state of physical solitude. We can be lonely in a crowd and peaceful in solitude. The key is developing a healthy relationship with ourselves. The practice of solitude teaches us to become our own best friend. We learn to enjoy our own company, to find our own thoughts interesting, to derive satisfaction from our own activities. This is not narcissism, but self-respect, the foundation upon which all healthy relationships are built. Solitude also provides the space for what the psychologist Rollo May called creative solitude, the fertile emptiness from which new ideas, insights, and inspirations emerge. Many of our greatest thinkers, artists, and spiritual teachers have emphasized the importance of solitude for creativity and spiritual development. The fear of being alone often stems from childhood experiences of abandonment or neglect. We may have learned that being alone means being unloved, unwanted, or in danger. Healing these early wounds requires us to gradually expose ourselves to solitude in small, manageable doses, learning that we can be safe and content in our own company. The practice of meditation is particularly helpful for developing comfort with solitude. In meditation, we learn to sit quietly with whatever arises in our consciousness without immediately acting to change it. We develop what Buddhists call equanimity, the ability to remain peaceful regardless of circumstances. Learning to be alone also means learning to self-soothe, to comfort ourselves when we are upset, to encourage ourselves when we are discouraged, to celebrate ourselves when we achieve something meaningful. These are skills that many people never develop because they have always relied on others to provide emotional regulation. The capacity for healthy solitude is one of the best predictors of relationship success. People who are comfortable being alone tend to enter relationships from choice rather than desperation. They are less likely to become codependent or to lose themselves in the relationship. They can give their partner space without feeling threatened or abandoned. The alchemy of transformation. The journey from attachment to love is ultimately a journey of transformation. We must die to our old self, the self that needs, clings, and depends, to be reborn as someone capable of genuine love. This death is not metaphorical, but viscerally real. It feels like dying because, in a sense, it is. The old self must be grieved. We must mourn the loss of the fantasy that someone else could save us, that love could rescue us from ourselves, that we could merge with another and escape the responsibility of being human. This grief is profound because it involves giving up our deepest illusions about life and love. But from this death comes new life. Like the phoenix rising from ashes, we emerge from the destruction of attachment with a new capacity for love. This love is not based on need, but on appreciation, not on fear, but on freedom, not on possession, but on reverence. It is love that enhances rather than diminishes, that liberates rather than imprisons, that celebrates rather than consumes. This transformation is not a one-time event, but an ongoing process. We must continually choose love over attachment, freedom over security, growth over comfort. Each relationship becomes an opportunity to practice this new way of loving, to test our capacity for non-attachment, to deepen our understanding of what it means to love without conditions. The process of transformation often involves what the mystics call the dark night of the soul, a period of spiritual dryness and apparent abandonment where our old ways of being no longer work, but new ways have not yet emerged. This is a necessary stage in the journey, though it can be profoundly uncomfortable. During this dark night, we may feel more alone than we have ever felt before. Our old strategies for getting love and validation no longer satisfy us, but we have not yet learned how to generate these feelings from within. We may question everything we thought we knew about love, relationships, and ourselves. This disorientation is actually a sign of progress. It means we are between worlds, no longer able to operate from attachment, but not yet fully established in love. This liminal space is sacred because it is where transformation occurs. We must be willing to not know, to be confused, to feel lost in order to find our way to something authentic. The alchemical tradition provides a powerful metaphor for this process. In alchemy, base metals are transformed into gold through a series of operations that involve breaking down, purifying, and reconstructing. The psychological process of moving from attachment to love follows a similar pattern. First, there is the nigredo, or blackening, the breakdown of our old ways of relating. Our patterns of attachment are revealed as insufficient. Our strategies for getting love are exposed as manipulative. Our beliefs about relationships are shown to be illusory. This can be a period of depression, confusion, and despair. Next comes the albedo or whitening, a process of purification where we begin to separate what is essential from what is superficial in ourselves and our relationships. We start to see clearly what is truly ours versus what we have taken on from others. We begin to distinguish between love and attachment, between our authentic self and our false personas. Finally, there is the rubedo or reddening, the emergence of the transformed self capable of authentic love. This is not a return to innocence, but an arrival at experience. We have been through the fire of transformation and emerged with the capacity to love without attachment, to give without depletion, to connect without losing ourselves. This transformation affects not only our romantic relationships, but all our connections with others. We relate differently to family members, friends, colleagues, and even strangers. We become less reactive and more responsive, less needy and more generous, less fearful and more trusting. The paradox of surrender. The ultimate paradox of moving from attachment to love is that we must surrender the very thing we want most. We must give up our attachment to being loved in order to truly love. We must release our need for security in order to find peace. We must let go of our desire to control outcomes in order to experience genuine connection. This surrender is not passive but active. It requires tremendous strength to love without guarantees, to give without expecting returns, to remain open despite the risk of hurt. It is the strength of the warrior, not the weakness of the victim. It is the courage to love fully while accepting that loss is inevitable. Surrender also means accepting that we cannot change another person. We cannot love them into loving us, fix them into wholeness, or heal them into happiness. We can only love them as they are, support their journey without trying to direct it, and honor their choices even when those choices do not include us. This acceptance is perhaps the most challenging aspect of the journey because it requires us to give up the illusion of control. We must face the reality that love is not a contract where good behavior guarantees desired outcomes. Love is a gift freely given with no strings attached, no conditions imposed, no expectations harbored. The spiritual teacher Krishnamurti spoke of surrender as choiceless awareness, a state of being where we no longer resist what is but simply observe and accept reality as it unfolds. In relationships, this means accepting our partner as they are, rather than constantly trying to change them into who we think they should be. Surrender does not mean becoming passive or allowing ourselves to be mistreated. It means releasing our attachment to specific outcomes while maintaining our boundaries and self-respect. We can love someone completely while still choosing to leave if the relationship is harmful. We can accept their choices while also making our own. The paradox of surrender is that when we stop trying to control love, it flows more freely. When we stop demanding that others love us in particular ways, they often feel freer to love us authentically. When we release our grip on outcomes, we often find that things unfold more beautifully than we could have planned. This surrender requires what the Buddhists call faith. Not belief in a particular doctrine, but trust in the fundamental wisdom of existence. It means trusting that love is the underlying fabric of reality, that we are held by forces larger than our individual will, that our ultimate well-being does not depend on getting our way. The practice of surrender can be cultivated through meditation, prayer, or simply through conscious choice in each moment. When we notice ourselves grasping, controlling, or demanding, we can pause and ask, what would it look like to surrender this? What would happen if I trusted instead of controlled? The freedom of non-attachment. When we finally transcend attachment and learn to love without clinging, we discover a freedom that is both terrifying and exhilarating. We are no longer slaves to our needs, prisoners of our fears, or victims of our circumstances. We can love fully without losing ourselves, give generously without being depleted, connect deeply without being consumed. This freedom manifests in countless ways. We can appreciate beauty without needing to own it. We can enjoy someone's company without needing to possess them. We can feel grateful for what we have without being destroyed by what we lack. We can love passionately without being driven by desperation. The freedom of non-attachment also means freedom from the endless cycle of seeking and losing that characterizes attachment-based living. We are no longer constantly searching for the next person, experience, or achievement that will finally make us happy. We find contentment in the present moment, joy in simple pleasures, peace in our own company. This does not mean we become indifferent or withdrawn. On the contrary, we become more available for genuine connection because we are not using others to fill our own voids. We can listen more deeply because we are not waiting for our turn to speak. We can love more freely because we are not afraid of loss. Non-attachment allows us to respond rather than react to life's inevitable challenges. When someone we love decides to leave, we can feel the sadness without being destroyed by it. When someone disappoints us, we can acknowledge the hurt without making them responsible for our happiness. When someone succeeds where we have failed, we can celebrate their good fortune without feeling diminished. The practice of non-attachment does not happen overnight. It is cultivated gradually through conscious choice, mindful awareness, and patient practice. Each time we choose love over fear, freedom over security, trust over control, we strengthen our capacity for non-attachment. This freedom also includes freedom from the need to be understood, validated, or approved of by others. We no longer require others to see us as we see ourselves or to affirm our worth. Our sense of value comes from within, making us less dependent on external validation and more able to love without agenda. The philosopher Jiddu Krishnamurti spoke of this as psychological revolution, a fundamental transformation in how we relate to ourselves and others. This revolution cannot be achieved through effort or practice, but only through seeing clearly what is false in our current way of being. When we are free from attachment, we discover that love is not something we get or give, but something we are. We realize that our essential nature is love itself, not the needy, grasping, fearful love of attachment, but the free, generous, fearless love that seeks only to express itself. The ripple effect. When we transform our relationship with love, we create ripples that extend far beyond our personal relationships. We become living examples of what it means to love without attachment, to give without expectation, to connect without clinging. This example gives others permission to question their own patterns of attachment and consider a different way of being. Children are particularly sensitive to these changes. When they see adults who are comfortable with themselves, who love without desperation, who can be alone without loneliness, they internalize these patterns as normal. They learn that love is not something to be earned or feared, but something to be celebrated and shared. The ripple effect extends into all areas of life. When we are not dependent on others for our sense of self, we can be more creative, more authentic, more generous. We can take risks because we are not afraid of losing approval. We can pursue our dreams because we do not need others to validate our choices. We can serve others because we are not depleted by our own unmet needs. In our work relationships, we become more collaborative and less competitive. We can celebrate others' successes without feeling threatened. We can accept feedback without being defensive. We can lead without needing to dominate or follow without losing ourselves. In our friendships, we become more available and less needy. We can offer support without expecting something in return. We can enjoy others' company without requiring them to entertain us. We can be present with their pain without trying to fix them. Even our relationship with strangers is transformed. We become more patient, more kind, more accepting. We see others as fellow human beings struggling with their own attachment patterns rather than as objects to be used or obstacles to be overcome. The transformation from attachment to love is perhaps the most important work we can do, not only for our own well-being, but for the healing of our world. A planet full of people who know how to love without attachment would be a very different place, more peaceful, more just, more beautiful. The eternal return. The journey from attachment to love is not a linear progression, but a spiral path that we traverse repeatedly throughout our lives. Each relationship, each loss, each moment of connection offers new opportunities to choose love over attachment, freedom over security, growth over comfort. We may find ourselves sliding back into old patterns, especially during times of stress or vulnerability. This is not failure, but part of the human experience. Each time we recognize attachment arising and choose love instead, we strengthen our capacity for non-attachment. Each time we catch ourselves clinging and consciously let go, we deepen our understanding of what it means to love freely. The path is not about perfection, but about awareness. It is about recognizing when we are operating from attachment and gently returning to love. It is about having compassion for our own neediness while working to transcend it. It is about understanding that the journey itself is the destination, that the process of learning to love is itself an act of love. This spiral nature of the journey means that we may encounter the same lessons again and again, but at deeper levels each time. What triggers attachment in us today may reveal new layers of our conditioning, new opportunities for healing, new possibilities for growth. The spiritual teacher Ram Dass spoke of relationships as curriculum for our soul's development. Each person who enters our life brings lessons we need to learn about love, attachment, and freedom. Some relationships teach us through pleasure, others through pain, but all offer opportunities for growth if we approach them with awareness. This perspective transforms even difficult relationships into gifts. The partner who triggers our deepest insecurities gives us the opportunity to heal those wounds. The friend who disappoints us teaches us about our expectations. The family member who cannot love us the way we want shows us how to love ourselves. As we continue on this spiral path, we develop what the Buddhists call equanimity, the ability to remain peaceful regardless of circumstances. We learn to love in all weather, to remain open even when hurt, to trust even when betrayed. This is not naivety but wisdom, the recognition that our peace and happiness depend not on external circumstances but on our own internal state. The journey also teaches us patience with ourselves and others. We recognize that everyone is at a different stage of the path from attachment to love. We can have compassion for those still trapped in attachment patterns because we remember what it was like to be there ourselves. We can offer support without trying to force change, knowing that transformation cannot be rushed. The ultimate teaching. If there is one ultimate teaching about the difference between attachment and love, it is this. Attachment asks, "What can you do for me?" while love asks, "What can I do for you?" Attachment is concerned with getting. Love is concerned with giving. Attachment seeks to possess. Love seeks to serve. Attachment fears loss. Love celebrates what is. This distinction is not merely philosophical, but practical. In every moment of every relationship, we can ask ourselves, am I operating from attachment or from love? Am I trying to get something from this person or give something to them? Am I afraid of losing them or grateful for their presence? Am I trying to control them or honor them? These questions reveal the truth of our motivations and give us the opportunity to choose differently. We can shift from attachment to love in any moment, with any person, in any situation. This is the power of consciousness, the ability to recognize our patterns and choose something different. The journey from attachment to love is ultimately a journey home to ourselves. It is a return to our essential nature, which is love itself. Not the needy, grasping, fearful love of attachment, but the free, generous, courageous love that is our birthright. This love asks nothing and gives everything. It possesses nothing and enjoys everything. It fears nothing and embraces everything. This is the love that has been waiting for us all along, not in another person, but in the depths of our own being. It is the love that transforms not only our relationships, but our entire experience of being human. It is the love that sets us free to be ourselves while allowing others to be themselves. It is the love that heals the wound of separation and reveals the truth of our interconnectedness. The mystic Rumi wrote, "Love is the bridge between you and everything." When we learn to love without attachment, we discover that this bridge exists not between us and specific others, but between us and all of existence. We realize that we are not separate beings seeking connection, but expressions of one unified consciousness experiencing itself through countless forms. This recognition dissolves the fundamental illusion that creates attachment, the belief that we are separate, lacking, and in need of completion by another. We discover that we are already whole, already connected, already love itself, expressing in human form. From this recognition, all our relationships become opportunities to share this love rather than to seek it. And so the journey continues, not toward some distant goal, but toward the ever-present possibility of loving without conditions, giving without expectations, and connecting without clinging. This is the invitation that life extends to us in every moment. To choose love over attachment, freedom over security, authenticity over approval. The path is not easy, but it is simple. It requires everything we have to give, but it gives back everything we could ever want. It demands that we die to who we thought we were, but it offers the possibility of discovering who we truly are. It asks us to let go of our deepest attachments, but it promises the greatest freedom we could ever know. This is the alchemy of love. The transformation of attachment into freedom, of need into gift, of fear into courage. It is the most important work we can do, not only for ourselves, but for all those we encounter on this journey called life. For in learning to love without attachment, we become agents of healing in a world that desperately needs examples of what it means to love truly, deeply and freely. The choice is always ours, in every moment, with every breath. Attachment or love, clinging or freedom, fear or courage. What we choose not only shapes our own destiny, but contributes to the collective awakening of humanity to its true nature, which is love itself. Not the love that binds, but the love that liberates. Not the love that possesses, but the love that blesses. Not the love that needs, but the love that gives, and in giving, receives everything. In the end, we discover that the journey from attachment to love is not a journey at all, but a coming home to what we have always been. We are love, wearing the mask of a human being, temporarily forgetting our true nature so that we can experience the joy of remembering. When we remove the mask of attachment, we reveal the face of love that was there all along, waiting patiently for us to recognize ourselves.